What if the difference between being seen as just another guy and becoming the man she can't stop thinking about isn't your looks, your money, or even your confidence, but the questions you ask and the emotions? Those questions awaken inside her when no one else is around. Most men approach conversations like interviews, collecting surface-level facts, as if attraction is built through information. But real attraction is built through emotion, and emotion is unlocked through the right kind of curiosity, the kind that doesn't just ask what she does, but makes her feel something about who she is. Because when a woman feels something deeply in your presence, she starts associating that feeling with you. And that is where real attraction begins to grow without force, without pressure, and without you needing to chase it. The mistake most men make is asking safe questions that keep the interaction polite but forgettable. Questions that don't create any tension, mystery, or emotional movement. And the truth is that attraction needs movement. It needs contrast. It needs moments where she feels seen in a way she is not used to. And that starts when you stop asking questions to impress her and start asking questions that reveal her inner world. Because people don't fall for those who try to impress them. They fall for those who make them discover something about themselves. When you ask a woman a question that taps into her emotions, something shifts in her body language. Before she even answers, she slows down, she thinks. Her tone softens, and in that moment you are no longer just a stranger or a casual conversation. You become someone she is experiencing. And that is the difference between being liked and being desired. Because desire is rooted in emotional experience, not logical evaluation. A powerful way to begin creating that shift is by asking questions that invite storytelling rather than short answers. Because stories carry emotion, and emotion carries connection, and connection builds attraction naturally. So instead of asking her what she likes to do, you ask her about a moment that made her feel alive. Instead of asking where she's from, you ask what she misses most about the place she grew up. And suddenly you are no longer gathering facts. You are uncovering pieces of her identity. And people are naturally drawn to those who take interest in their deeper layers. There is also something subtle but incredibly important in the way you ask these questions. Because it's not just the words, it's the intention behind them. If your intention is to get something from her, she will feel that pressure. But if your intention is to explore her world without judgment, she will open up without resistance. And that openness is where attraction breathes, because it creates a space where she feels both safe and intrigued at the same time. And that combination is rare. Another layer that most men completely overlook is the power of contrast in questions. Because when you mix light, playful curiosity with deeper emotional questions, you create a rhythm in the conversation that keeps her engaged. One moment she's laughing, the next she's reflecting, and that emotional variation makes the interaction feel alive. It prevents boredom. And more importantly, it creates a sense of unpredictability, which is a key ingredient in attraction. Because people are drawn to what they cannot fully predict. When you ask her something slightly unexpected, something she doesn't usually get asked, it interrupts her usual conversational patterns. And in that interruption, you create curiosity. And curiosity is often the first spark of attraction. Because now she is not just answering you, she is wondering about you. She is trying to understand what kind of man asks questions like this. And that curiosity pulls her in without you needing to push anything forward. There is also a deeper psychological dynamic at play here. Because when someone answers a meaningful question, they are investing emotionally in the interaction. And the more someone invests, the more they value the experience. So when you guide a conversation in a way that allows her to express herself, to think, to feel, to reveal parts of her personality, she begins to feel more connected. Not because you told her to, but because she naturally became involved in the interaction. And that involvement is what turns a simple conversation into something memorable. At the same time, it is important to understand that not every deep question creates attraction. Because if the question feels too heavy, too intrusive, or poorly timed, it can create discomfort instead of connection. And this is where emotional intelligence becomes essential. You have to feel the moment, read her energy, and gradually lead the conversation deeper instead of forcing it. Because attraction grows best when it feels natural. When it feels like a discovery, rather than an interrogation. A powerful approach is to start with questions that are slightly different, but still comfortable. Questions that hint at depth without diving straight into vulnerability. And as she responds and becomes more engaged, you slowly introduce more meaningful questions, allowing the emotional intensity to build step by step. And this gradual progression creates a sense of intimacy that feels organic, because it mirrors the way real connection develops over time. Another key element that transforms ordinary questions into attraction-building moments is the way you respond to her answers. Because if she shares something and you simply move on to the next question, the emotional moment is lost. But if you acknowledge it, if you reflect it back, if you show that you understand or appreciate what she just revealed, you deepen the connection. And that depth is what makes her feel seen. And feeling seen is one of the most powerful emotional experiences a person can have. When a woman feels that you are not just hearing her words, but actually understanding the emotions behind them, she begins to relax in your presence. And that relaxation allows attraction to grow naturally, because she is no longer guarded. She is no longer filtering herself. She is simply being. And in that state, her true personality comes out. And that is what creates genuine chemistry. There is also an element of subtle tension that should exist in these conversations. Not tension in a negative sense, but a kind of emotional pull, where she feels both comfortable and slightly challenged, where your questions make her think in a way she is not used to. And that challenge creates intrigue, because it stimulates her mind, and mental stimulation is often overlooked. But it is a powerful driver of attraction, especially when it is combined with emotional depth. Attraction is not built through perfection. It is built through moments. Small moments where she feels something different with you than she does with others. And the right questions create those moments. They open doors to emotions that are usually hidden in everyday conversations. And when you consistently create those emotional experiences, you naturally become associated with something meaningful in her mind. It is also important to understand that silence plays a role in this dynamic, because after asking a meaningful question, giving her space to think and respond without rushing creates a sense of presence, and presence is deeply attractive. It shows confidence. It shows that you are comfortable in the moment, and that comfort allows her to feel more at ease as well, making the interaction feel grounded rather than forced. The deeper truth behind all of this is that asking the right questions is not about technique. It is about mindset. It is about genuinely wanting to understand another person beyond the surface. And when that mindset is real, your questions naturally become more engaging, more thoughtful, and more impactful, because they come from a place of curiosity rather than strategy. And people can feel that difference instantly. When you begin to master this way of communicating, something shifts in the way women respond to you. Conversations last longer. They feel more meaningful. And there is a subtle emotional connection that starts to build without you having to chase it. Because you are no longer trying to create attraction directly. You are creating the conditions where attraction naturally emerges. And that is a completely different approach from what most men are used to. And once you understand this, you realize that attraction is not something you convince someone to feel. It is something you allow them to experience. And the right questions are simply the doorway into that experience. A way to guide her emotions, her thoughts, and her attention in a direction that feels both exciting and genuine at the same time. As you start moving deeper into the interaction, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. The conversation shifts from curiosity into emotional gravity. And this is where most men either hesitate or completely lose direction. Because this is the stage where attraction either strengthens into something real or fades back into polite interest. And the difference lies in your ability to guide her into feelings she doesn't usually access with others, not by forcing anything, but by asking questions that touch identity, desire, and vulnerability in a way that feels natural yet slightly intoxicating. At this point, your questions are no longer just about her experiences. They begin to explore how she sees herself and how she wants to be seen. Because deep attraction is often tied to a person's self-image. And when you ask questions that allow her to express that image, you are stepping into a space that most people never reach. And that space is where emotional intimacy begins to form quietly beneath the surface of the conversation. Instead of staying in safe territory, you begin to ask things that carry emotional weight, like what kind of moments make her feel truly understood, or what kind of energy in a person makes her naturally open up without thinking. And as she reflects on these things, she is not just answering you, she is feeling those emotions again in real time. And because you are the one guiding her there, those feelings start to become connected to you in her mind. There is something incredibly powerful about making someone feel understood before they even fully understand themselves. And when your questions lead her into that space, you become more than just someone she is talking to. You become someone she is experiencing on a deeper level. And that experience is what creates emotional attachment. Because people don't attach to conversations. They attach to how those conversations make them feel about themselves. You can also begin to introduce a layer of playful challenge. Not in a confrontational way, but in a way that gently pushes her to reveal more of her personality, like asking her what people usually misunderstand about her, or what side of her only a few people ever get to see. And when she answers, she is revealing something slightly hidden, something not everyone gets access to. And that sense of exclusivity creates a subtle bond, because now the interaction feels different from the rest of her daily conversations. As the emotional depth increases, your presence becomes more important than your words, because the way you listen, the way you hold eye contact, the way you respond with calm confidence, all of it reinforces the emotional space you are creating. And this is where many men fail without realizing it, because they focus too much on what to say next, instead of fully absorbing what is happening in the moment. And when you miss the moment, you miss the emotion. And without emotion, attraction cannot grow. A key shift here is moving from questions that explore her past into questions that explore her emotional patterns. Because patterns reveal who someone really is beneath their experiences. And when you ask about what makes her feel safe with someone, or what kind of connection feels real to her, you are entering territory that is deeply personal, and if done with the right tone and timing, it creates a sense of closeness that feels almost unexpected. There is also a magnetic effect that happens when you mix emotional depth with a sense of mystery about yourself. Because while she is opening up and sharing parts of her world, you are not completely revealing everything about yours. And this balance creates intrigue. It makes her lean in, not just emotionally but mentally. Because now she is curious about you, in the same way you are curious about her. And that mutual curiosity is what transforms attraction into something more dynamic and engaging. Another powerful technique at this stage is to ask questions that connect emotion with imagination. Because imagination amplifies feeling. And when you invite her to imagine certain experiences or scenarios, even in a subtle way, her mind begins to create emotional responses that feel real. And again, those feelings become associated with you, not because you told her to feel them, but because you guided her into a space where those feelings naturally emerged. For example, when you ask her about the kind of moments that make her lose track of time, or what kind of connection makes her forget everything else around her, she is not just thinking logically, she is visualizing, she is feeling, and that internal experience is far more powerful than any surface-level conversation, because it engages both her emotions and her imagination at the same time. At the same time, it is important to maintain a sense of emotional control, because if the conversation becomes too intense too quickly, it can feel overwhelming rather than attractive. And this is where pacing becomes everything. You allow moments of lightness to balance the depth. You let her laugh, you let the energy breathe, and then you guide it back into something meaningful, creating a rhythm that keeps her engaged without feeling pressured. There is also a subtle shift that happens when a woman begins to feel emotionally safe yet intrigued. She starts to test the connection in small ways, sometimes through her questions, sometimes through her tone, and sometimes through the way she responds to yours. And if you stay grounded, if you don't overreact or seek validation, you reinforce a sense of stability that makes the attraction feel secure rather than uncertain. As the interaction continues, your questions can begin to touch on desire, not in a direct or explicit way, but in a way that explores what she values in a deep connection. What kind of presence makes her feel drawn to someone? What kind of energy creates chemistry for her? And these questions naturally bring the conversation closer to intimacy, without crossing into discomfort, because they are framed around emotion rather than physicality. This is where attraction starts to feel real, not just like a possibility, but like something that is actively growing between you. Because now the conversation is no longer about getting to know each other. It is about experiencing each other. And that experience carries an emotional weight that lingers even after the interaction ends. One of the most important things to understand at this stage is that less is often more. You don't need to flood the conversation with constant questions. Sometimes a single well-placed question, followed by genuine attention, creates more impact than 10 rapid ones, because depth comes from focus, not from quantity. And when she feels that focus, she feels valued in a way that most people rarely offer. There is also a powerful moment that can happen when you reflect something back to her in a way she has never heard before. When you take what she shared and express it with clarity and insight, and in that moment, she feels deeply understood, almost as if you see a part of her that others overlook. And that feeling can create a strong emotional pull, because being truly seen is something people crave on a very deep level. As you continue guiding the conversation, the goal is not to reach a specific outcome, but to deepen the emotional experience step by step, allowing attraction to build naturally without forcing it. And when you do this consistently, you create something that feels effortless yet powerful. Something that stands out in a world full of shallow interactions. And as this emotional connection strengthens, something begins to change in the way she looks at you, in the way she responds, in the subtle energy between you. Because now you are no longer just someone asking questions. You are someone who makes her feel something real, something rare. And that is what makes attraction deepen into something she cannot easily ignore. And this is where everything either comes together or quietly falls apart. Because the final stage of building deep attraction through questions is not about saying more. It is about understanding what has already been created between you and allowing it to evolve into something that feels undeniable. Something that no longer relies on effort but on the emotional momentum you have carefully built. Because by now she is not just responding to your questions. She is responding to you, to your presence, to the way you make her feel when she is around you. At this point, the dynamic shifts from exploration into connection, and your questions become fewer but far more intentional. Each one carrying emotional weight, each one opening a small door into intimacy. And the key here is that you are no longer trying to learn about her. You are allowing her to experience herself through you, which is a completely different level of interaction, because now the attraction is not based on curiosity alone. It is rooted in emotional resonance. You begin to ask questions that bridge the gap between who she is and how she feels in your presence. Questions that gently bring awareness to the connection itself. Like what she enjoys most about conversations that feel real, or what makes a moment with someone stay in her mind long after it ends. And as she answers, she is subconsciously evaluating the experience she is having with you, often realizing that it aligns with what she is describing, and that realization strengthens the emotional bond, without you ever needing to state it directly. There is a quiet power in letting her come to her own conclusions, because when a feeling is self-discovered, it becomes stronger and more meaningful. And this is why indirect questions, questions that guide rather than tell, are so effective at this stage. They allow her to connect the dots herself, to feel the attraction as something natural, rather than something being imposed on her. You can also begin to introduce questions that touch on emotional vulnerability in a way that feels safe and inviting, not by asking her to reveal her deepest fears outright, but by creating a space where she feels comfortable sharing parts of herself that she doesn't usually express. And when she does, your role is not to analyze or fix anything, but simply to hold that space with calm understanding. Because emotional safety combined with emotional stimulation is one of the most powerful combinations in human connection. At the same time, there is an undercurrent of tension that should remain present. A subtle sense that there is more beneath the surface, something unspoken yet felt, and your questions can gently play into that by exploring themes of chemistry, connection, and emotional pull, not in a direct or explicit way, but in a way that allows her imagination to engage. Because imagination is where attraction often intensifies beyond logic. When you ask her what kind of connection feels rare to her, or what kind of presence makes her feel both comfortable and excited at the same time, she begins to articulate feelings that she may already be experiencing with you. And this creates a feedback loop where her own words reinforce the attraction she feels, making it more real, more tangible, and more difficult to ignore. There is also a moment in every deeply engaging interaction where words start to matter less than the feeling itself, where the pauses become more meaningful, where eye contact holds more weight than any question. And this is where many men make the mistake of breaking the moment by over-talking or trying to maintain control of the conversation, when in reality the most powerful thing you can do is allow the silence to exist, to let the emotion breathe. Because in that silence, the connection deepens without effort. As you reach this stage, your questions can become more reflective, more about the experience than the details, asking her how she feels when a conversation flows effortlessly, or what makes her feel truly connected to someone in a way that goes beyond words. And as she reflects on these things, she is not just thinking, she is feeling the present moment more intensely. And that intensity is what transforms attraction into something lasting. It is also important to remain grounded in authenticity, because no matter how well you understand these dynamics, if your intention shifts into trying to manipulate or control the outcome, it will eventually show, and the connection will weaken. But if your intention remains rooted in genuine curiosity and presence, everything you do will feel natural. And that naturalness is what makes the attraction sustainable rather than temporary. Another powerful element at this stage is allowing her to ask you questions and engaging with them in a way that maintains the same depth and emotional openness. Because attraction is not built in one direction. It grows through mutual exchange. And when she feels that you are equally willing to share and explore, the connection becomes balanced, creating a sense of partnership rather than pursuit. As the interaction nears its natural conclusion, there is no need to force a dramatic ending or push for validation. Because the strongest connections are often the ones that feel incomplete in a good way, leaving space for anticipation, for curiosity, for the desire to continue. And this is where your final questions can subtly plant that feeling, asking her about experiences she looks forward to, or moments she enjoys sharing with someone she connects with, and in doing so, you create a bridge between the present interaction and a potential future one. The true power of asking a woman questions that build deep attraction lies not in the questions themselves, but in the emotional journey they create, a journey that moves from curiosity to connection to chemistry. All without force, all without pressure, simply by guiding her into experiences that feel meaningful and real. When you understand this, you stop trying to impress, you stop trying to prove yourself, and you start creating moments where she feels seen, understood, and emotionally engaged in a way that stands out from the ordinary. And those moments are what stay in her mind long after the conversation ends, shaping the way she thinks about you and the way she feels when she remembers you. In the end, attraction is not something you chase. It is something you cultivate through presence, awareness, and the ability to connect on a level that goes beyond surface interaction. And the right questions are simply the tool that opens that door, the bridge that allows two people to move from strangers into something deeper, something more magnetic, something that feels almost effortless, yet incredibly powerful at the same time. And when you master this, you realize that the most attractive thing you can offer is not perfection, not clever lines, not even confidence alone, but the ability to make someone feel deeply, to make them experience themselves in a way they rarely do. Because that is what creates connection, that is what builds desire, and that is what turns a simple conversation into something unforgettable